Hello, and welcome to Shite Talk, an Irish history podcast. I probably sound very sick, because I am. Too much alcohol, too many days in a row. Straight on the Guinness, just pure cans, because I got homesick. You know who else might be homesick? Kevin Larney, because he's out holidaying, cycling all around Ireland with his family. That's why he's not here today. That was a good little segue. I don't have much to say today because, again, I'm very tired and I also haven't listened to this episode yet. Kevin just sent it on to me. I'll give a couple of small shout-outs. Thanks to Tom McCool for a message he sent into us. I'm not going to read it out because I'll explain it once later on. He'll know. He'll get it. Cheers, Tom. And then also, maybe we've given him a shout out before, Sean Hurley. I think I saw him re-signed up or just signed up to the Patreon. He's one of those, there's certain of ye fans out there that you see their name because you like things and comment or review it. We now know names of people that we've never met before going like, oh, it is himself or herself, which is nice. And that's also a nice little plug for the Patreon if anyone wants to support us in continuing to do the podcast and all the bonus content you'll get there. And also because I'm still in America and have no legal way of making money otherwise. So there's enough of a guilt trip for you. Oh, and another shout out I'd like to give is... Well, I should explain. We're going to start doing some adverts on this at the very beginning. Not yet. Soon. It'll be a thing. Definitely by next season. Not for the premium content on Patreon, obviously. That's why you pay for that. And the regular episodes won't have ads on the Patreon as well. So that's another reason. But we don't have anyone yet. So in lieu of bending the knee to corporations and becoming a shill... Well, I mean, we do want to do that. But for the moment, because we don't have a sponsor this week, I'm going to give a shout out to Outer Realm Tattoo in Carlow, down on, Jesus, what street's that? I've been away too long. It's just like the bottom of Tullow Street and you take a right. Christ, I've fucking forgotten where I came from. Well, sure, just Google it anyway, you'll find it. And follow him on Instagram, all that crack. But yeah, if you want a tattoo, and that looks as the quality of the tattoos that I have, which are amazing, and that's not to toot my own horn, I'm tooting Rossi's. That's the man you want to go to get some ink on your body. Or face, whatever you're into. I probably should have set that up by going, the reason we're doing a shout out for Rossi's because this, it'll become apparent throughout this episode, and stuff. Yeah. Enjoy. I'll chat to you next week when I'm not massively hungover and tired and sick and I have Kevin to bounce off of so I don't feel the pressure of doing all of this on my own. Bye.
Gather around now, you're in for a story. Old tales of lore, all in search of a glory. The history and mystery of lads, lasses and all. Discoveries and voyages, the rise and the fall. Follow me now as we go back in time. Retrace the steps of Irish heritage to find. Joseph from Carlow and Kevin the dog guide you through the ways of Shite Talk.
On the 10th of November 1808, James F. O'Connell was born on Thomas Street in the Liberties, which means that the two, I didn't realise this until afterwards, but the two guys I've written about were both Liberties men. The Chris man was also from the Liberties. So
Yes.
This season is sponsored by...
The Fontaines. DC.
The Fontaines. DC Fontaine's new album is heavily sponsoring this season. So
DC Fontaine's new album titled We Should Probably All Spend Less Time on the Telephone and Screens and Such.
Put the phone down every once in a while, that's all I'm saying.
Spend less time on
Read
screens. Should spend less time on screens. We should all spend less time on screens.
Here's a hot take on modernity. I actually think sometimes that social media is actually making us less social. So James F. O'Connell, born in the Liberties, a proper Liberty Dublin man. At an early age himself and two of his sisters, they were sent off to school in Monster Evan. They were there for about 5 years when the three of them were brought back to Dublin before being shipped off to Liverpool to be reunited with their parents, who had apparently run off to join the circus. There's not really much written about his early life, but it seems like they were just shipped off to a boarding school and then his parents went to work in Liverpool at a circus.
That is great.
Yeah.
What is your talent? I'm really good at running away from home.
I'm an escape artist. My kid's still at home waiting for me to like reappear. I walked into a closet 5 years ago. He's still waiting for me to come out.
I'm the champion of the longest running game of hide and go seek.
So the first time James speaks with his parents, it's it's been 5 years since he saw them last, and he's in their dressing room after seeing them perform at the circus, and he is into it. He's like amazed by the performance. He's captivated by the circus. He loves it. So he spends a year with the folks, catching up, getting to know them again, before moving to London with his uncle. At this stage he's 11. He's basically a man, so his uncle doesn't have to keep too much tabs on him. So he spends his time wandering around London, making friends with sailors. I guess he's not in school or anything. It's the 1800s, so he's just chatting to sailors.
What?
Yeah. So one of them, a man called Captain Salmon of the ship Phoenix, took a shine to him. He takes a shine to him, and he offers him a job at on the ship. So he hires this kid to work on a ship at the age of 11.
Impart all of his knowledge onto him, you could say.
Yes, it's like suck my thumb.
Well, from what you've been saying so far, Kev, it wasn't his thumb he was sucking.
Yeah, and to be honest, so a lot of this comes from James's autobiography, and it's written in a very... I thought the story was going to go a different way.
I don't want to hear about what's coming in Salmon's autobiography.
Yeah. Here we're about to cancel Salmon, just blow this wide open after cancel Captain Salmon. Well, yeah, because he hires him at age 11 to do, I don't know to do what, like what's he going to do on a ship? But so apparently without telling anyone where he's going, O'Connell just hops on the ship, heading for Botany Bay, Sydney. The ship was carrying 200 female convicts to the prison colony out there.
Looking to sow some roots.
Yeah, so I guess he's just like, I'm 11. Here's a ship of 200 fine women heading out to Australia. I mean, I don't need to tell anyone where I'm going. I'm out of here. But I'd say 11-year-old O'Connell was probably doing the rounds. But, well, yeah, because they're at sea for, I don't know how long it would take to get to Sydney back then. Months, probably.
Years, decades at this stage. It's kind of like how long does it take to get to Mars in 2021? Because that's basically a sea voyage.
So in his autobiography he said, "Here were 200 ladies, for so I suppose we are bound to style them, put on board of ship for the purposes of being conveyed many thousand miles from their native land, and what was probably worse for them, obliged to labour honestly for their bread."
What?
So he's basically like 200 ladies in this ship, so I suppose you have to call them ladies these days, and they're all being shipped away thousands of miles from their native land, but what'll really hurt them is that they'll have to actually work for a living now. They wouldn't like that, Jason.
Instead of just lying on their back.
Yeah, instead of just, scrounging off the state. So, I guess he didn't write this. He didn't write this when he was 11, but I suppose he's got some... He hasn't got a lot of kind...
If he did, fair play to him, but also I'd question who he's like... What was his upbringing?
He's just so cynical at such an early age. Especially because back then people would be thrown in prison for they wanted to fill the colonies, and it's Ireland in the 1800s. To be throwing people onto that, if you're a Catholic, you basically just get in the boat. You're heading out to Australia. He's
so
just
here
like,
I am.
He's just like some 60-year-old man you get into a conversation with who just starts going off about, I don't know, and I'm paying for their housing, So he lands in Sydney eventually, and from there, I guess he's hanging around there for a while. And at the age of about 21, he joins a whaling ship called the John Bull, heading on a trip from Sydney to New Zealand in 1829. So he's heading off to the New Zealand. But on the trip, they get caught up in a storm. The captain was drunk. In his biography, he said he was plastered most nights. So he was drunk as usual, and the ship hit a reef and then sank. But the whole crew managed to escape in 4 different boats, heading off into the sea. James was in one of the boats with 5 other sailors and the wife and daughter of the missionary who was on the ship.
Did the drunk captain survive?
Yeah, they all survived, but the drunk captain,
okay.
The drunk captain went off on a boat with the missionary, and the missionary's wife and daughter went off on a separate boat. Which it doesn't seem like there was that big a crew on the ship, and I know the boat's going down or whatever, but surely you could have planned that a little better.
I would understand it if he was like, no, I'm going to... No, I also wouldn't understand it, but I could make a case for I'm leaving my wife and kid. I'm going to go join the church. I've just had a run in. I could have died. I'm changing my ways. I'm going to give myself to God. He's like, no, I'm going to get in a boat with the missionary and leave his wife and children.
Well, the missionary left his wife and kids. He was like, you go on that boat. I'm going to hang out with the drunk captain.
Yeah, that's why I'd be like, I don't understand it. I don't get, like, I understand the other way.
Yeah,
I don't get this.
And
surely they're all heading in the same direction. It's not it's not like there's a monster in the sea and they're like, quick, sketch, everyone scatter. We're like, 4 different ways. They might get one of us and that'll be it. It's just the water. Every direction you head is going to be the same peril. So just
true. They end up they're not going in the same direction. They get separated almost immediately. So they lose sight of the other boats and they drift off into the open sea. And after 3 days of exposure, the daughter of the missionary dies. And
she says, "Could you please put your pants back on?"
Well, they were very civil, according to his own account of what happened. But so the daughter died after 3 days, and then the mother died shortly afterwards. But so it is, I guess, suspicious that the two women on the boat die. So I guess we can't corroborate any of their account of the story. They would have seen.
No, we can't corroborate. No, we can't corroborate their story because it doesn't exist. They're both dead.
Oh, they can't corroborate James's story. Yeah, like James is just like, yeah, we had a lovely time. We played some cards, and then after, because 3 days is not I guess 3 days is not a long time to die of just being on a boat.
I mean, look, if you're shot in the stomach beforehand,
yeah, sure. But they were just like on a boat. I'm sure they were fishing from. I didn't really talk about how they ate food. They wouldn't have had access to water, I suppose. But still, it seems like 3 days to just die.
Yeah, but wait,
is a little suspicious.
They went out there. They started playing cards.
Yeah.
These two girls started talking about how they're just not particularly happy in life, and it's actually just dawned on them right now. It's not really worth living, is it? Sorry to do this on your boat, but I just don't feel like partaking in this society anymore.
Yeah.
And then he has to step forward and live the rest of his life going, I swear to God, this actually happened.
She just sort of, how people just sort of die? That's what happened. And then the mother also died within hours of her. And we left them, both of their bodies at sea because of reasons.
Yeah. Well, she said she wanted to do a midnight skinny dipping with no lights and no one of any knowledge to save her afterwards. And then just so happened, as she hit the water, she spontaneously combusted.
No, it's not an urban myth. It's documented. Here's a document of it happening. And then on the fourth day, they see the coral island of Pohnpei. So Pohnpei is about halfway between Hawaii and the Philippines. It's currently one of the 4 states of the Federated States of Micronesia, but at the time was home to a tribe that had yet to meet any Europeans. So according to O'Connell, as they approach the islands, loads of canoes start coming out to meet them, and once the locals see them, they start like throwing stones at them, firing arrows at them, until the 5 sailors like lay down the boat and convince them that they're no threat. So they just back off a little bit and then shepherd them into the coast.
Wait, is there a tactic to let's let them shoot themselves out and then we'll wave the flag?
Yeah, that seems to be their whole ploy, is just like get down on the ground and hope that they run out of stones.
It worked.
It did, yeah. So
also now I'm just trying to think of what a society would be like if it wasn't influenced by European culture.
Yeah. Well, we'll get into that a little bit, I guess. But it seems pretty chill. So when the 6 of them land on the island, they're captured by the locals. They're stripped of all the clothes and all the stuff is taken off the boat. As O'Connell was stripped naked and the locals are examining his white skin and blue veins, he starts remembering all those stories he heard at sea about cannibals, islands of savages eating people alive, and he starts to sweat a wee bit.
He starts thinking, they're mermaids.
I know this old game. When can I mate with one of these beautiful sea wenches? Luckily, these aren't those horrible reverse mermaids I've heard about. But so he starts to sweat a wee bit, and it comes into his head. I guess what would you do in that situation? Like, how would you survive? His survival instinct kicks in.
Oh, I know how I run. I run.
Yeah, if you run, you probably get a spear in the back. And then someone will put a spear in your hand, and witnesses will swear that you were the one who started the confrontation. Okay, so you had the fight or flight option, and you chose flight, which is that's like a real double or nothing. You're like, that's a freeze frame moment of like, all right, you're in this amount of trouble. Would you like to deal with the consequences or risk it all to see what happens next?
Yeah, to ruin your life.
Yeah,
to mentally
yes.
change your mindscape for the rest of your time on Earth.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, now what you should have done, and what O'Connell did, all of his instincts kick in. He thinks he's about to get eaten by these guys. He does what any normal person would do. He breaks out an Irish jig. He starts dancing to Gary Owen, doing the Gary Owen dance.
The old up and under.
The old up and under. And according to him, the locals loved it. One of them even figured out what he was doing and threw down a mat for him to dance on.
Hold on a second.
Yeah.
You're saying that every other person was just there going, I'm loving this, I've no idea what's going on, and it took one genius to go, I think it might be some kind of a dance, maybe.
But why would they have a mat?
What kind of a dance is it? That they're like, hundreds of other people are looking at him going, why is he rolling around in the mud? Why is his face down, ass up in the mud, just falling around the place? I think what it is it might be some kind of an Irish jig.
Can you imagine an Irish jig without any music, though? And he's like on the sand. Well, before he gets to the mat, obviously. He's just dancing on the sand, giving it all that, throwing his legs up and under. But apparently they love it. They're going mad for it. And so, according to him, he reckons it saved his life that very day, of him and the other survivors of the boat. So there's also...
Did they talk about it ever?
Well, we'll get to that in a second, because there's this...
It sounds to me like he was recounting his tale, and then he has imagined it into this thing. Where he's like, and it's what has set us free in the end. It's like, do you not remember the pirates that came and slaughtered our masters? No, remember when I danced? Do you remember when I danced?
As for the other people, they're on the boat. Of the 6 survivors, there was George Keenan, another Irishman from Dublin, John Johnson, an Englishman, Edward Bradford, who was from Bristol, John Thompson from Liverpool, and John Williams of London. So
a lot of Johns.
Yeah, 6 very, very Anglo-Saxon.
Feel like I'm in Philadelphia.
There.
That's a very specific joke for our Philly listeners, all 5 of them.
So after 4 days, some people came over from a neighbouring island to inspect the newcomers, and they pick James O'Connell and George Keenan out of the group and bring them back to their island with them. And then he never mentions the other guys in his story again. Yeah, he doesn't. I think they just abandoned all the British guys. They're just like, if there's only room for 2, myself and George, I'll head on with you. And so he doesn't say like they died or anything. They just they don't show up again.
Someone reminds him 10 years later. It's like, what are all those British guys? It's like, oh yeah, no, you're right. There were. Whatever happened to those guys? They were good. They were fun. What was the? Oh, yeah, we burnt them and ate them. That's what it was. It was yeah.
They knew too much about those 2 women we killed on the boat. I thought it was just better. Dead men tell no tales, you know what I mean? So the 2 of them are now heading off to one of the neighbouring islands. So everything I've said so far is kind of up for grabs as to whether it actually happened or not. Because this is all coming from a book that O'Connell wrote himself. But at some point in the 1960s, so the book was published in the 1850s, and 100 years later in the 1960s, some people started it was like a big deal book, and some people actually started looking into any of the claims that he'd made, and none of the stuff really added up. Some documentary nerd said that the records for the Phoenix ship that he went to Australia on initially, the dates that he gave for when it left didn't make any sense, and the ship only ever took male passengers, so there was no account of it having 200 female passengers on it. And maybe he just spiced up the story to make it a little cooler. I don't know. It was me and 200 ladies sailing to
What is
Sydney.
he? Like a 12-year-old coming back from a foreign holiday. He's like,
Yeah,
right,
well,
lads, so
yeah,
I was in, I
almost
was in
exactly.
Lanzarote. There was 15 girls staying with us in the hotel resort. No guys.
Man,
Unbelievable.
it was Shift City, man. You wouldn't even their names. Their names. Yes, about that.
Couldn't pronounce them, lad. Couldn't pronounce them. All foreign.
Yeah, all like those class Italian names, man. You couldn't even write it down. But well, speaking of names, then there's also suggestions that very little of that happens. That so what they know for sure is that he did end up on the island himself and George Keenan. But it seems someone put forward an account that himself and George might have been transported on a prison ship themselves to Australia, but were brought up as deckhands to because the ship was short staffed, and then dumped out on the first island they got to after Oz because they were too much trouble. There's an RTÉ documentary about the guy, and in that they were saying they found reports of a manifest from a prisoner ship called Ferguson that left Dunleary Port, or Kingstown Port as it was at the time, heading to Norfolk Island Prison with a 21-year-old James O'Connell from Dublin on board, who was sentenced to life for the crime of breaking into a house. So the name and the age match up with our James O'Connell, and it makes more sense than the story he tells. But also it throws some light onto, so at the start when I was reading that bit where he was like giving out about all the women on the ship, all the prisoners, and how they'd have to like go over and do an honest day's labour, something they wouldn't be used to. They might not have existed at all, and he himself was a prisoner and was just, you know how these women are, just never work a day in their life.
Yeah, but I mean,
in reality, it was just all
none
fiction.
of this is surprising me.
Yeah.
This is like, I think that's today. That's like, we think of most angry men in the world are like unemployed or underpaid, underworked, like just guys who hate women because women won't give them the time of the day. Basically, like ostensibly fucking incels.
Yeah.
That's just why, like, these women just they're working as fucking hairdressers, but are they working? It's like, yeah, but I mean, just because I haven't had a job since '98, that gives me the right to be able to tell them that no, you're not.
That's not real work at all.
No, unless you're breaking your back for £20 a day, what's the point?
So so he himself may have been the convict, and these 200 women may not have existed. But you can imagine them, Jason. That's just the sort of thing they would do, you know. Sure, this mightn't have actually happened, but it could have, and that's the real truth. But we're speaking of names there, so it also seems like maybe, so if none of this happened, then those names of the English people that he had, like, mightn't have existed.
It's all just lies, and I love him so much.
But then that makes sense. Like, the names he gave forward were John Johnson, Edward Pratt, John Thompson, and John Williams.
John Johnson, John Johnsonson, Johnson, and Johnson Johnsonson.
Yeah, I was over here with some great British colleagues, or their names. John Johnson.
We've got John Williamson, we've got William Johnson, we've got William John, we've got John William.
Tom Thompson, Tom Johnson. Those two didn't get along, and let me tell you that much. There was John, Tommy John, and Will Tom John I am. And then me and George, the two people that survived in this story.
We've got John Joseph Jingle John.
But so right, how he got to the island, you know, it doesn't really matter unless you if you're hung up on the truth of the story. But he did get to the island, so himself and George definitely were stranded on this island. So when they arrived to the new island, it's just the two of them now. There's a huge feast to celebrate, and after a few days of feasting, O'Connell and Keenan are brought to like a new part of the island that they hadn't seen yet. They're instructed to sit on either side of this room when they go in, and then 5 or 6 beautiful women come in carrying strange devices and some black liquid. So according to some anthropologist, in order to be considered a proper citizen in Pompeii, in order to like own land, get married or whatever, it was like getting your PPS number. You needed to go through this ritual. So O'Connell is held down by these women, and they use some device to like stretch his skin tight. They dip some bamboo into the black liquid, they drop it onto his hand, and then like he describes it as sort of a mallet with thorns on one end, and they just hammer it into the ink. And for some...
Wait, so they pour ink on his hand and just hit him with a mallet full of thorns to like stick the ink into him.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
That's very primitive.
Well, yeah, but it's an island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean in like 1820 something.
Yeah, but even then, surely there was a son of a woman who had notions, who also had notions. That was like, what if instead of using a full mallet, we do an artisanal single spike for every individual? Like, that would happen within the space of one generation. So if it's an island nation, I'm just telling you, they've got it down. They've got it down.
He's probably wishing for that one single poke coming along. But well, they used seashells in order to like pluck the hair out of his body, which is also, I suppose you'd have notes on that. They should be using something else. But for some reason, he just sits there and takes it. So he doesn't know what's happening. Obviously, he can't understand the language, but he just accepts it. And they do this for 8 days, just giving him breaks intermittently, obviously, but they just batter tattoos into him basically for 8 days. And they put them all over his body. So his legs are covered, his thighs, his arms, his torso, his back, and one of his hands.
But not his face, because he still wanted a job in future.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm not sure if this whole slave trade is going to work for me in future. This being a prisoner kind of deal. I might want to get a job in Argos.
Yeah, nothing above the collar line. But so they do that for like 8 days, and it takes them a month then to recover. They're covering him in coconut oil every day to help heal the tattoos. But it takes him about a month before like he can get back to normal. He says his mate George wussed out and never got his tattoos finished. So I think they started into it, and he was like, I'm out. Which I think that's the more reasonable thing to do. If you get brought into a cave and some women start beating ink into you, like he wouldn't even really understand the concept of what a tattoo is. I think he'd see their tattoos, I guess, but he wouldn't really know what's happening.
I mean, no, he's an idiot.
I suppose he wouldn't know that they're permanent either.
I would know. Okay. I'm thinking he would know they're permanent. I'm thinking he would know that they're probably not of great quality. None of this matters, Kevin. It's because I would imagine you're like myself. Like, if that was me right there and then, and they were like, you're going to have to be battered full of tattoos. It's like, is it so I can have sex with all these women covered in tattoos? Is that what I have to do so I can do that?
Sign me up.
Yeah, like that's exactly what I would do. Like, neck to toe is what I want. Just like covered.
Well, that's pretty much what he has. But so... Well, one of the other reasons, he doesn't mention this in his book, but the anthropologists are also saying that one of the other rituals that they had to sort of, because now he's tattooed, it means he's part of the tribe. He's been brought into the tribe. But one of the other ways to prove your manliness was to crush one of your testicles, left or right, you could choose, with a stone. Just batter away. So maybe they offered him that first and he was like, poke me up.
Oh, Sorry, it's either or. I thought you meant...
See, he doesn't mention it in his book, but like the people who've studied the island afterwards were like, yeah, that was definitely a thing at the time. So he might have also done this and just left it out. He might have had to go through this and just didn't mention it because he's like, I'd rather not relive that bit.
Yeah,
or maybe he was given the choice and went for the tattoos instead.
Or his friend was like, he tapped out halfway through the tattoos. He's like, do you know what? This is tough. But I feel like if I just get the testicle bashing out of the way now, coming back for the second half of the tattooing, it won't be as bad then. And then he gets his ball crushed and they're like, so you're done? He's like, no, I got to go back now and do the rest of that smaller thing. You're like, no, it was very much so optional.
I chose wrong. Yeah, that bit, I was listening to the documentary and it got to that bit, it made me feel very unsettled.
Like you were on a roller coaster, just hitting the G-force drive down.
Yeah, not for me. But yeah, and well, apparently, according to the anthropologists, again, apparently it was also common practice to get your dick tattooed as a thing, like a sign of entering manhood, which he also doesn't mention in his book. But it's possible that he also got his wang done.
he just moves to an island nation, starts doing things he wanted to do, and say in their culture, that's actually.
Why did you tattoo your dick? No one else on the island has that done. I've been asking around.
I love it.
He's-
It's great.
Yeah, he's got
He's exploring and he's learning about himself.
yeah. So at the end of the month period of healing, they all celebrate with another feast, with the local delicacy roast dog served for all the gang. I don't know where they're getting dogs on this island, but they're eating them. O'Connell thought that the feast was just him being welcomed into the tribe or something, like him just being ingratiated in. But during the ceremony, the chief's daughter came up to him and tattooed another 4 rings on his body. And this is what you were talking about. At this stage, they're using, I think, it's just a single poke thing for these ones. She tattoos like 4 little rings into it. And as the night goes on,
Ceremonial.
yeah, he starts to realize that, oh shit, this is my wedding night, and I've just married this woman. So he's been married off to the chief's daughter, which...
Nice.
But I'd imagine some of the locals are fairly annoyed at like this. Imagine this blow-in coming in.
Yeah, but I mean...
You've been standing
You're
in...
golden. Yeah, but you're golden for life until someone decides to usurp and murder the king.
But
And
I mean...
then your life's pretty shit then. You're almost definitely the number 1 target directly after him. But until that happens...
But like, imagine all the lads who've been queuing up, courting this woman for ages, and then this like foreign lad blows in, and within a couple of days, they're married off.
I assume that that's what a lawful, like, I'm not a ladies' man by any stretch, but like, also, I'm a nice fella, so I end up being like friends with like normal enough fellas. And then, but if they have attractive friends and I get talking to them and I like them, and then afterwards I realize, oh, that was definitely that guy liked that girl. They invited me into, like, I am that guy.
Yeah.
Like, I
Sure,
am that foreign guy who's like, oh yeah, I met this guy and he was around for a week and I introduced him to a girl I really like and then he went off with her. And you're like, I barely knew you and that was a woman I was attracted to.
Yeah, well, that's sort of what's happened here. But and much, I'd say, like in many of your situations, Jason, she was 14. Although he himself was like 21 at the time, so I guess not crazy bad for
so that was
times.
legal. So half your age, -7.
Yeah. They had. He's just drawing that rule in the sand. He's doing the
Like,
maths.
it's meant to be a plus. What?
Oh shit.
Oh no! Oh god, no!
So now he's fully in the community. He spends his time hunting and fishing with the tribes. He joins them in battles against enemy tribes. He's eating baked dogs with the best of them.
He's picking berries with the women. He's fighting bears with the men. He's dancing with the wolves.
Yes, yeah. He's Pocahontasing it up. He ends up staying on the island for about 5 years, and over that time he has 2 kids with his new wife, a girl and a boy. He doesn't say in the book, because obviously the tattoos, they're not just random.
At this stage, I'm not believing anything you say that this man said. He's like, I had a boy and a girl. I was like, do they exist? Could I talk to them at any point? He's like, funny thing about them is...
What were their names?
It wasn't actually part of the culture to name your offspring. It was more...
Mary Marenson and John Johnson. I named them after my fallen comrades. But so obviously the tattoos are kind of like, it was described as like a biological text. They have meaning in them as your position in the tribe and all that sort of stuff. I don't think he figures out what it means.
Wentworth Miller.
Oh, yeah, this is a Prison Break situation.
Yes.
It's been far too long since we've talked about Prison Break on this
podcast. It's a very season 1 shite talk thing.
Yeah,
we must both have been watching it. I've been re-listening to old episodes. Like we talked about Prison Break a lot.
We did. I think maybe we were. I don't know, watched it, but it's golden age of television. Yeah, he's now set up to break out of Fox River Penitentiary now. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know if he figures out like what his tattoos mean when he's on the island. But in November 1833, he spots a ship passing the island. So he asks the chief and his wife for permission to go out to the ship, but they refuse. He's trying to convince them that it's not like a war vessel. I think they're probably worried that he'll just run off. That he'll run off when he gets to the ship, but he's insisting that like, I only want to head out to see it. I'm not gonna abandon you. You know, this is my life now. I've been living here for 5 years. I just want to see the ship.
I just want a pack of cigarettes. I just want to see if they have cigarettes.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not entirely sure. I think he ends up like, he just goes down to the canoes and sort of like, he gets his old friend George. I don't know what George's position is in the society either, because he's not married to the chief's daughter. I think he might just be whipping boy because he didn't go through with the tattoo thing, or maybe he burst one of his balls. I'm not sure, but he grabs George, and they go down and just get a canoe and start heading out to the ship. I think they've got some of the local lads on the canoe with them as well, but they head out, and as they're approaching the ship, like a strong wave knocks the canoe over, and George and O'Connell end up just swimming out the rest of the way to the ship. They swim up to the ship and see that it's called the Spy of Salem, and they shout up to the crew up there, and the crew is obviously confused because they're like looking down at this tattooed man, being like, "Well, what are the odds that all the natives on this island speak English?" But he manages to convince them that it's a good idea to let him on board. So they throw down a rope, and he gets pulled up, and he meets the captain of the ship, Captain Knight. Now, I'm not entirely... I read this passage in his book, and I don't know exactly why they do this, but they send schooners back to the island, I think to trade maybe with the locals, or like to talk to them. And at Knight's request, O'Connell like steers the ship back in through the coral to anchor it beside the island. But so he's brought the ship back to his new home. Himself and George don't get off the ship; they just hide in the ship.
Gotcha.
So
yeah.
But they're gone. He's just abandoning his wife and kids.
You're saying wife and kids.
Yeah, okay, but even if that's true, then he wrote into his own story that he had a wife and kids, and he's like, he doesn't even have the decency to say goodbye. He's like, no, I just need to borrow the canoe. I'll be back. Don't worry about it. And then he just hides on the ship.
It's not really his wife. It's like, I was pulled into this place, they'd started hammering me away with this ink.
Yes.
And then I was finally given some food, and then they came up with a much smaller thing of ink, started peppering me with that. And then all of a sudden, I had a child and a knife to my throat, and I had a bunch of men with I'm going to give him leeway. I'm not saying that men should ever run out on their families, but if this is your situation, if it's the 1800s and you've been pulled into an indigenous island where people can't speak the language, are just destroying you with ink, probably have poisoning at this stage, because I doubt it's sanitary.
Yeah, it's actually crazy that. Well, I suppose they have it down to a fine art at this stage, but I know what you're saying. Yeah, I did. When I was reading this, I was getting annoyed at him for like, he's abandoning his wife and kids. What sort of a man is it? Well, he has been kidnapped, basically. He's
forced against his own.
But now he could say goodbye, and I don't think he was forced to sleep with this 14-year-old girl against his will. I think he was pretty much up for that bit.
You could do that, but also. I was going to be like, I've had to leave countries before. I haven't had to leave countries after I've had a wife and children. And like, I'm going to bring a load of men in there to rape and pillage the town, and then just sneak off with them. Because I'm going to guess, Kevin. I'm going to hazard a guess. Is that what they did?
Yeah, you're unfortunately correct. And again, I don't really know what happens with this, but I think he says in response
history of the world.
So they're trying to trade with them. Yeah, well, no, because they're only, in the book he says like they're responding to some, it's I don't know, they're trying to trade with the guys anyway, but obviously
in the book it says, well, they were out having a good time, they were with their friends, but maybe they wanted some attention. I mean, have you seen what they were wearing? And it's not really feasible to be out at that time of night on an island on your own. I mean, you're basically... You should be,
I don't want to say asking for it, but
I don't want to say you're asking for it, but I'm just going to say that if you don't understand that there are imperialistic powers at work who might at any point descend upon the island and do that to you, you need to be thinking more cleverly. You need to be more cleverly.
But you're right. So they end up, I don't know, something happens and Captain Knight and his men start killing the locals, which I mean, I guess at that point then you can't really go back to the island. So he's just brought down the full joys of colonialism onto this place that's been his home for the last 5 years. But also in the book, he writes that like He writes that Captain Knight is a coward for what he's done, but in the sentence before that, he's like, myself and George hid on the boat because we couldn't face going back to... I couldn't say goodbye to my wife or kids. And then the cowardly captain stabbed one of my children, probably.
But how does he? Yeah, how does he know if he didn't go and face it? How does
I
he?
guess he's because they're anchored just offshore, so I guess he's either watching it or he'll hear about it when the because everyone goes back on the ship and then they all leave together.
Yeah, but that would be the worst way of finding out about it, because he's on a boat there and he's like, right, and then just some guy called Damien is just there and he's like, do you remember when 4 of us were having a go off of that girl who just kept saying, my white husband will show you? And you're like, oh, I really hope that's one of the other white guys. That's
Maybe John Johnson.
When my husband comes back to save me, he'll show you what for.
Ooh. yeah.
But he seems. Yeah. I'm gonna be honest now, Kev. I don't know if I've let it. Maybe the audience can pick up on it. I don't think he's a good guy.
No, and it's always funnier when these stories are like, because half of this stuff is made up, but it's written by him, and even in his own telling of the story, he's a prick. But so they leave. So he's just brought down a rain of terror onto his old home, and they sail off into the sunset. So it takes them about 14 days to get to Guam, where Captain Knight tries to dump the 2 lads out there, but the authorities in Guam don't let it. So they head off again with them. So during this part of the passage, O'Connell, he's quite sick. He says he's suffering from like cold, exhaustion, and fatigue from the change of diet. So he's obviously gotten used to eating cooked dog.
Mm-hmm. The cold, exhaustion, and fatigue of Guam. He's got something. I don't know if it's... Is this an STD?
Yeah, maybe he stopped off for a little bit in Guam.
I was fine until I got here, and then I left there after a week of unprotected sex, and all of a sudden I had an awful lethargy about me. You know, I just had this,
Under
a lack
the weather.
of energy. Yeah, I just couldn't. No chutzpah, no get up and go, no pep in the step.
So he's lying, half passed out up on the deck one night, and Captain Knight comes up and gives him a kick and asks him what he's doing. And O'Connell argues with him that he's sick, but it gets into a heated debate and comes to blows. Knight ran off to get guns apparently, but in the book O'Connell's like, but he was all talk. You'll do nothing.
That's what he said.
Yeah,
you
pretty much.
Nothing.
It was like, this
you do fucking nothing.
Which is a great callback to his Dublin heritage, but but then when they show up in Mantilla, Knight gets the 2 lads charged with being runaway convicts. In the book, he gets us charged with being runaway convicts from New Holland, mutineers, pirates, devils, witches, hobgoblins, etc. So I think he's just throwing as many charges at them as he can stick. But it also
the first one's true.
Yeah,
they are runaway convicts.
Well, yeah, see, that's the thing. It lends credence to the fact that they may have been runaway convicts. So the 2 of them get arrested in Mantilla. They stay there for a while, but ultimately they're not tried. And eventually they head off on a Spanish ship heading to Macau and then on to Halifax in Canada, which was in the middle of a cholera outbreak at the time. So he's definitely enjoying, he's like, it's good to be back off the island, back into modern society. I'm getting beaten up and kicked around by some captain, locked up in a Spanish prison, and now slap bang in the middle of a cholera epidemic. This is what I've been dreaming of for the last 5 years. So when they land into the place, George, who's still with him, he gets sick. They reckon he comes down with cholera, so he's brought off to a quarantine. And James does the same thing and leaves him behind and heads off to the US of A.
I mean, he's done it before.
He's got precedent. So that's, I don't think he ever sees him again. But James arrives in New York in the autumn of 1835.
Oh, I feel like this is the start of a new story.
This is a start. This is where he gets. This is where he changes direction. Once he's in New York, he enters into the family business and becomes a performer. He starts displaying his tattoos professionally, originally as part of Lion Circus for 25 cents a gawk. So people.
Oh, it's a freak show.
It's a freak show. He goes into the freak show business.
Nice.
Yeah, people have never seen anything like this before.
It's the best job you could have.
Oh yeah, it's amazing. Like his whole job is just sitting around being like, look at all these tattoos that were forced onto me.
Yeah, you work
Isn't
for
that
2
neat?
hours a day. You just stand around and you just constantly get like positive affirmation from other people going, ooh, ah.
But there was also accounts of women running out of there screaming, because apparently ministers were saying from the pulpit at the time that if any woman carrying a child saw O'Connell with the tattoos would then transfer onto their unborn baby, which that's just science. I couldn't tell what religion these ministers were, but I think we talked about it before at some point.
I would
Leviticus.
guess.
Well, because they're all against it apparently. In Leviticus of the Bible, which is the same book that brought us the great passage about not lying with women as you lie with men, there's another one in there about like, ye shall not make any cuttings in your flesh for the dead, nor print any marks upon you, which has been interpreted by like some Jewish sects and Christianity as it being a sin to have tattoos, and it's also it's haram in Islam as well. So there's three of the big ones, and they're all like against tattoos, I suppose, at the time.
Yeah, but what if when they were saying don't lie with men like you lie with women, what if they just meant like some things your missus doesn't need to know? It's just for the boys. Do you know?
Yeah.
Like that's the people drastically misinterpreted.
It got mistranslated. Yeah, sure.
It was just more so like, hey, if you just keep some smaller white lies to yourself, we won't have a 50% divorce rate in future.
You can get away with lying to the lads about stuff that you just can't get away with lying to your wife about.
Yeah. Or tell the truth to the lads and then just never tell your wife anything, or vice versa.
Either or. Yeah, just don't do them the same. That's the main thing.
Yeah, and never let the two meet.
So James becomes pretty famous now. So in a lot of the things I was reading, he's described as like the first man to publicly display tattoos in North America. But I don't, because there's like Native American tribes that would have had tattoos as part of the culture, but they're never mentioned. I guess they mightn't have been in these
the first man
shows.
the first man to be paid to display tattoos.
Yeah, that's probably the first man who wasn't kidnapped and then put on the first man to volunteer to go into one of these traveling circuses. But so yeah, he's back in 1835. In 1836, at the age of 28, he publishes his biography, which was called
a biography at 28.
Yeah, I thought that as well. That is. I guess this is the times, but that is pretty ballsy to be like, here's my life story at 28.
I've probably over the space of our 6 seasons given like an awful lot of my life story out on this podcast.
Yeah.
And that's only the highlights and the stuff I'm willing to do and the best parts of it, and it's still not that interesting, and it wouldn't fill up a book.
No, well, this is
I'm
short
that
enough.
age. I'm that age.
Well, it's a short enough book. It's you can read it online if you want. Most of it does seem to be lies, but it was called The Life and Adventures of James F. O'Connell, the Tattooed Man, during a residence of 11 years in New Holland and the Caroline Islands. He refers to New Zealand as New Holland, which I think was, I don't know if that wasn't the official name at the time, but I think that's what a lot of English people called it, as a translation from the Dutch. So after publishing his book, O'Connell starts traveling around America, doing the freak show circus circuit, showing off his tattoos, regaling people with his stories, and dancing the Gary Owen jig that he claimed saved his life. Now apparently,
that with all the tattoos, I'd pay to see that.
That's something worth seeing. 25 cents for that, I'm in. Money well spent. Now, apparently he got more tattoos in later life, because he is described as having tattoos on his face and is like areas that wouldn't be traditionally tattooed on the island. So I think he started adding to it more.
What is that? You're like your entire body plus cock, and then there's like, but also there's some areas that wouldn't be historically accurate. Yeah. Like what part? Your nipples? Like what is it? What are those parts that they're like you didn't get that on the island because we wouldn't do that on the island? You're like,
they would. Some things are sacred, not your balls or penis. They'll smash those with a rock, but you can't have a neck tattoo. They're not crazy.
Yeah, I am lost.
I
don't understand what they want.
I think it's just that I think he added more tattoos as he went on, but he just said that they all came from the island. Now, like, he was covered in tattoos off the island, but I think as maybe they started to fade over the years, but he like topped them up with just to keep the it's his whole thing. If you become if you become the tattooed man, you gotta get more tattoos, you know.
Oh, did you ever think about like what your life would be if you stopped doing comedy?
Yeah.
And then every so often, one of your friends remembers you used to do comedy, or someone like you kind of knows, like, oh yeah, is he still doing the comedy? You're like, no, not really, and it kind of just fades off, and you forget about it, and you're not happy in life, and it's like a normal thing. But if you can't do that with tattoos. Because you can't go to that person and be like, hey, I haven't seen you in 10 years. Weren't you didn't you used to be covered head to toe in tattoo? Oh, actually, do you know what it is? It's I can still see it. It's your fucking face.
Yeah, I get at this stage. Yeah, this guy's not going to be like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to pack it in. I'm 31. I'm getting up there. Right. I'm going to lean back on the old communications degree. You know, I'll retrain or whatever. Put on those shirt and tie. He's still covered head to toe in tattoos.
I realize I'm more of a fan of watching and appreciating and doing a little bit myself, but I'm not trying to pursue it as it's already on my eyeballs. It's already on my eyeballs.
Well, he's in the unfortunate situation where in like on Pompeii, the tattoos, he needed them to be brought into society, and it made him part of the culture. And then like when he gets back to America, he doesn't have much options. Tattoos are like he's described as being a horrific sight in numerous, like he's kind of pitched as a horror monster, but he's kind of fucked either way, I guess. So
if he just waited around for 150 years, if he
he'd be
just
flying.
held on, he could open up a coffee shop, maybe start selling individual handmade fiddles. Like he'd make a fortune.
There's no pictures of him, and like no drawings of him, which is unfortunate. I don't know how. I don't know. Like, how unusual would it be by today's standard? Like the amount of tattoos he has. I'd say he did seem to be like covered in tattoos, but.
No, it would have been very weird. But also, I know I know so many people who are literally neck to toe, just covered.
Yeah.
Like I know,
like a sleeve is normal enough now, and it's probably like I don't know. They wouldn't have had as much tattoos as a sleeve, I would imagine, but I don't know.
I'm sure. I'd say he did. I'd say he was covered all over.
Yeah, maybe it was
just like tribal, thing. Not Irish tribal. Not like I went to Ibiza in '98 and got just flames all the way down my left arm. Did you not think about maybe making it a sleeve? It is a sleeve. Look, it covers the entire arm. Okay, yeah, cool.
Yeah. So in the 1840s, he teams up. Well, he becomes part of P.T. Barnum's show. Barnum was famous at the time for his like freak shows, I guess. He had a flea circus, a loom that was run by a dog. He had the trunk of a tree under which Jesus' disciples were said to have sat. Ned, the learned seal, the Fiji mermaid. He had little people, Siamese twins, a giant men, bearded ladies, and a spider baby.
Sounds like Disneyland Cork.
Yeah, that's exactly what this is.
Give me that list again.
Do you want the list again? Yeah. So this is a flea circus.
Do I want that list again? I want you to give me that list, and I want you to make a new season of Shy Talk based upon every single one of these people.
A flea circus, a loom run by a dog.
Okay, this is all making perfect sense because that's just your standard Irish circus. But continue.
Yes. Now I don't know. I assume it's like an actual loom. It's not as if the dog runs a business. It's like he runs fruit of the loom.
No, he's running a sweatshop.
Yeah.
What kind of rejected spec script of Wishbone is this?
They've got the trunk of a tree under which Jesus' disciples were said to have sat. Now that's just verifiable.
So they sat under a tree.
Yeah, they sat under
a tree.
Yeah, it's made up anyway. It's just a piece of wood that he has. But so yeah, because I'd heard the name P.T. Barnum, but I thought like these all seem to be scams, really. Like the flea circus, the dog with the loom, it's just a tree that he's found. He also had Ned the learned seal. I don't know what that is. He had the Fiji mermaid, which was a mummified monkey's torso with a fish's tail, that he said was a mermaid from Fiji.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
Huh?
See, I thought it was more in my head. I thought it was more stuff like so. Yeah, he's also got like the bearded ladies, and then he's
That's
got like
pretty-
little people
yeah.
and giants and Siamese twins. I thought it was more that sort of stuff, but it also feels like it's just like scams as well.
Yeah, but also then there are like a bearded lady. If you saw a bearded lady now, how would you react? Actually, that's a weird question to ask in 2021.
I know. It's like in
when
2021, you'd be like, I'm not going to ask any questions.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I saw Eurovision in 2017. Like I'm used to this now.
Yes,
But
yeah.
I remember going to see, it might have been Muse or it could have been Oasis, I'm not sure, like back when I was like 16, 17. But I remember being in a pit and I saw a bearded lady and she just had, like, her face was covered in hair.
Yeah.
Like, whatever, I'm not sure what I don't want to call it a condition, but I'm not sure what the technical term is, so I don't mean no offense to anyone. But, like, her face was legitimately just covered in hair.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I've never seen that before, but that's exactly what people used to like pay money to see.
Yeah.
That would be like, oh yeah, because that is, even now in 2021, we're not like, oh yeah, that was a common thing in one part of the world. We just didn't have access to it because we didn't have, instant access to the internet and, an abundance of information. No, that's just even still now, just not that common. Just to see someone's, like a woman whose face is just covered in hair. So that is legitimately, and no offense if we have any listeners out there who are
sure,
but
it's interesting.
That is, it's like if you had 7 fingers, you'd be like, that is fucking, I've never seen that.
That's more the sort of stuff I thought would be in this thing, like a 7-fingered person. He probably had that as well.
But a bearded lady at the same time. But you've tied it in there with going like he had a dog. And there was a child who was 5 foot before the age of 10, unheard of in the nation.
But that was another one. He had someone called General Tom Thumb, who was the smallest person that ever walked alone. Who he claimed was 11. I think it was an American with dwarfism who he claimed was 11, but they're actually 4. And then they were just plying them full of drink and cigarettes.
You said they were 11 and 4. Do you mean like?
Yeah, he was just like, here's an 11-year-old
inch?
man. Oh no, it was a 4-year-old.
Oh well, then that's just.
Yeah, it's pretty fucked.
It's pretty fucked.
But it's also a scam. So, so at its peak, the museum would have been getting like 15,000 visitors daily. I didn't know. I haven't seen it though. Have you seen The Greatest Showman, the film?
No.
Yeah, apparently that's P.T. Barnum, and from what I've read online, it does like. It's a musical about how he's sort of accepting of all these different freaks that come from different walks of life, as opposed to an exploitative scumbag who like just
but
he was either doing scams on the public or like taking in people with who are cast out of society and be like, I'll pay you a nickel a year, go stand on that box, watch while I give this 4-year-old some alcohol.
Well, I mean, it's a musical. They're like pretty much wrote directly from the viewpoint of someone on the left, and not just like the left like ourselves. There's someone who's like far left, someone who's like, my parents paid for me to go to theatre college and then I didn't have a job for 10 years but was writing this 90-minute thing about nothing. Like, this is going to be a fair representation of the world in which we live. There's like, yes, here's a grocer who makes 5 cents an hour. All I've ever wanted to dream was to be a star. Like, it feels like most people just want to pay rent. Like most people just want to pay rent, man.
Well, that's why they don't get musicals written about them. But in 1852, he was traveling with Dan Rice's circus around Mississippi when a load of the troupe got sick from some chemicals that were being used to like light the rooms. Whatever way they got the lights set up, it involved chemicals. I don't know. And then a lot of them got poisoned. And due to his weak lungs, O'Connell died shortly afterwards on January 22nd, 1854, at the age of 46. So in all the things I read, it said like he died shortly afterwards. That's a year and a half afterwards. It's not really like the next day.
Oh no, and especially in that time.
Yeah, in those times that you've got a death sentence of a year and a half. That's like you're 46. That's like being told like, you've got another 20 years to live when you're like like if you get sat down at 95, like you've only got 20 years to live. I'm so sorry.
That's what I love. I do tend to. It's not a good thing, but it is always fun to hear an Irish person say it. Whether like I guess look, every country has the same thing, but it's the same as like one where like Irish lads and going to the doctor. Oh, they're awful. It's like Irish mothers. Oh, aren't they the best? It's like, well, yeah, but there's also there's mothers in Africa who walk 25 miles a day for water. Yeah, like most mothers tend to like their offspring. Most kids tend to also like their parents.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Like,
so most cultures are like, aren't mothers great?
You never find a mother like an Irish mother. It's like, what about the Syrian mothers? It's like, yeah, but did they ever guilt you into calling them twice a week? No. Oh yeah, nothing like an Irish mother.
I feel like you had a point there, though.
I did. What was I saying directly before that? But sure, it's the same as like when you hear an Irish lad be like, oh, do you know, I smoked for 40 years and I got lung cancer and the doctor said I had 2 weeks to live, and sure didn't I live for 2 years. Now, I coughed up a lung and caused my family an awful horrid time. They got to see me at the worst, in a physical state and a mental state that they didn't think would even be possible for me. So much so that it dragged down the family for generations afterwards. But, do you know, the doctors were wrong. I guess I died a horrible death, but I wasn't as quick as they'd said it would be. So should we even listen to them? Do they know what they're on about whatsoever? I
don't know. Also, the way you've told this story, it sounds like it's a ghost saying this. Actually, I lived another 2 years before I died. So listen, don't worry about those doctors.
Have you ever met a ghost in a pub?
Yeah, like
you're just like, oh my god, I should have just ordered Smittix. Now there's going to be 2 minutes of a wait for the Guinness to be topped off, and I'm stuck here talking to a fucking premonition.
I love the idea of dying and passing into whatever the afterlife is, and like, you know, getting the Highlander, the quickening basically, and gaining all the knowledge of the Highlander, and still being like, it's a load of bollocks. Doctors, quacks, that's what they're like. But so James O'Connell's, he's dead. He apparently, his dying request was to have Gary Owen played at his funeral and for someone to dance the jig on his grave. Which might be true, or maybe that was just someone who hated him. It could have been his wife that he'd abandoned on the islands, came and like danced on his grave. Like, it's what he would have wanted.
Just screaming at us. They're just and they're throwing in the muck and the roses on top of it. And they're just there on top of the coffin, just doing the river dance. And they're like, it's what they would have wanted. It's what they would have wanted.
I also have a feeling that, like, because this happened while he was on tour, I think, and I have a feeling they might have charged tickets to it and been like, yes, this was his dying request to make it into a spectacle. There'll be 25 cents to go. If you want to dance in the grave yourself, that's an extra 5 cents.
50 cents for an open casket.
Yeah. But... so, yeah, it's estimated that he would have had an audience of over 20 million over the space of his life. The 20 million people would have seen him because he was constantly touring around America, and then he'd always go back to New York for the freak season, I guess, and he'd then go another tour around. So good
numbers.
Yeah, big numbers.
I definitely, I'm going to tell you right now, 20 million people have not seen me.
Yeah, definitely. That's the same for most people. But so the RTE documentary I was listening to, it was just like all those RTE documentaries. It's far too somber for the stuff that it's dealing with. There was a whole line where he's like, James F. O'Connell, he was a pioneer who opened the door to body art. He was a lad who got fucking stuck on an island and like forcibly tattooed and then went into a freak show. But they're like, he was a visionary who led the way into public tattoos.
Or he got kidnapped and tattooed. Like, maybe you're just reading too much into it.
Yeah.
But this has nothing to do with, as I've left it long enough before I'd asked you, this has nothing to do with your man in Fiji. That fella because I've been looking into this. There's some guy out in Fiji that back in the 1800s, a ship lost on its way to somewhere went by Fiji, and they'd found some Irish fella, and he's covered in tattoos, and they're like, what's going on with you? You're the only white guy there, speaks English, and he's like, I have 82 children. He's just like, I got here, I was a god. It's literally what you see in movies and TV shows. What would you do if you ended up on an island no one had ever heard about, and there's just gorgeous women around? You're like, well, do you know what? I really need to get back off this island to go back to a minimum wage job, or even just like, I need to go make 40 grand a year and have a wife burning the ear off me and sons who don't respect me after the age of 12 until they're about 30, and then we try to reconnect. But by that stage, it's a bit too late because I'm already fucking disappointed in you because you're not what I wanted you to be. Or stay on the island. Stay on the island.
Yeah.
And you're literally a god. They call you like La Flama Blanco.
Well, that's like when O'Connell gets off the island, he just gets beaten up by a captain, thrown in jail. His friend gets cholera, and then he's just got a life of like being in a freak show circus. Whereas he could have just stayed on the island. You know, his son would have been the new chief when the old lad kicked it. He could have just lived the life there.
Yeah, but you say it like a circus, like he's kind of like an indentured servant, where he's gone to the circus going, hey, I know you've got a lot of people who don't have any talents and are just doing things.
Yeah.
They're just like, it's the man who stands beside an elephant. Look at this guy. Braver than I am. I would never do something as stupid as that. You're like, hey, I've actually got something really fucked up with me, so I want to be paid properly. I imagine he's the cock of the walk in the circus. Like he's got, you actually have a deformity.
Well, he sets... because you just said another example of where this happens, but I think he sets a precedent. It sort of becomes maybe not a mainstay of these shows, but like it becomes more common for them to have tattooed men afterwards. And initially, it's a lot of guys like him who the same thing happened. Basically, got stranded on a Pacific island covered in tattoos. But it does sort of go on to become people start doing it on purpose, like as a thing, where it's no longer they're like getting tattooed by like New York tattooists. There's a big tattoo scene in the Bowery, which brings us on to the next part of the story.
I was going to say, for a second, when I had legitimately thought you were like, people started doing this on purpose. I thought you meant like, I'm going to go out to the island and just get tattooed, and that's my life now. That's what it's the 18th century equivalent of, right, I'm 40 years of age, life in the Western world in like Dublin, it's not working out. I'm going to Thailand, I'm going to Bangkok, I'm going to Pattaya, I'm going to Rayong. Life isn't going to be what my parents wanted it to be for me. Also, they're not around anymore. I'm going to Southeast Asia.
I'm going to just jump off a boat and hopefully wash up on one of these islands, get the tattoos, get rescued, and then become a star on the freak show. But no, people cut out the middleman instead. They're just going to tattoo artists. There's like a big scene in the Bowery in New York, and they're going to tattoo artists and basically becoming art pieces to display like for different tattooists, and then going into shows like that. Which brings us on to the next bit of the story, the last bit of the story.
But
4 months after,
you'd tell though who had it on the island and not.
Oh yeah, they're not trying to pretend that it's from the island. They're just kind of like, what about this? We did this on purpose.
Oh, okay. Did they also smash one of their testicles to dust?
Yeah, yeah. Some guy completely misunderstood. Is like, you're not coming for the tattoos. I know you're all just here to see a man castrate himself.
Yeah, it's like, is what you're trying to do the thing that has nothing to do with the pain and suffering of? You just want the artistic
you wanted
side of
the
it.
Art.
Yeah, it's like upper middle class white guys in America being like, I've always really felt at home with the blues music. I've really always loved blues. Just I thought it was like chain gang kind of music. That's what I'm always about. Like, you are from Wisconsin. You love cheese. Every single person. No one in your lineage has ever met a black person. You're not. No, it's rock and roll or death metal, or else singing a high pitched voice and playing acoustic guitar. Like, they're your three options.
But so then 4 months after James F. O'Connell died, Samuel F. O'Reilly was born in Connecticut to Irish immigrant parents Thomas O'Reilly and Mary Ann Hurley. At some point in the 1880s, he moves down to New York and becomes a tattoo artist. So after O'Connell's Tattooed Man show, it becomes more common. People are going in to like get covered in tattoos purposely to show them off as part of these sideshow attractions. There's things called like the dime museums, which I think are just where you pay a dime and go in and see weird curios, and people will be in there with like showing off their tattoos. Samuel tattooed his younger brother John O'Reilly with a full body pattern, and he was often billed in these shows as the tattooed Irishman. He'd go to these exhibitions in the dime museums of the Bowery, and then heading around on the travelling circuit for a number of years at some point in the 1880s. But you can see pictures of him, which are pretty cool. Yeah. So I don't know, I don't know what time photography was invented, but like, I suppose I don't know. Things are moving quickly. O'Connell's been dead for about 20 years, 30 years at this stage. So there's no photographs of him.
But game changing though. Tattooed Irishman. It must be like when the iPod came out, and it had buttons, and then like there was the Creative Zen or whatever it was, and you're like, oh look, this is good as well. This is good. Oh yeah, but then they came out with a better one that's touchscreen, and shite, because that's what a tattooed Irishman must be. Because you get there and you're like, oh, we've got a tattooed man. Oh, this circus also has a tattooed man. Well, this circus has a tattooed Irishman. Oh, well, that's no different than the other thing, but okay, I'm on board.
And he would have been just about in time to... Yeah, so I guess the tricolour was around at that stage. He would have just been in time for that. He would have got the harp. He would have had... The IRA was being used maybe at that point. All he's missing is like a drunken leprechaun looking to punch whoever is playing against Notre Dame. I don't know what stage they came up with that mascot.
Someone asked me that last week. Was I a fan of Notre Dame? And I was like what? The Hunchback? Or what are we talking like? Oh, it's far more likely that I would understand French literature than I would in college American football. Yeah.
But actually, yeah, so then Thomas Darcy would have been in around Boston and New York at the same time. He was there in like the 1860s, 70s, or was he? Or maybe he was in Canada at that stage. But maybe he went to see the Tattooed Irishman. Support a bit of local flavour.
What are you doing now? You're basically just a lost Irishman in a new country who's met another Irish person, and then been like, so do you know by any chance? Would you? I know it's New York. I know it's a big place, but it's 20 million people. But on the off chance, would you know by any chance? Would you know? You would know.
Well, if he's being advertised as the Tattoo Irishman, you'd be like, Jesus, I may wander in. Sure, maybe I might know him from the old country.
True. Also, as much as I complain about that, and everyone in Ireland does, like as soon as Irish people meet each other, they're like, "Would you? Where are you from? Do we have people in common?" So many times that's happened to me in like other continents around the world. Just like as in Carlow, and met someone from Cavan. They are technically different continents.
Yeah. Well, it could be like that. Maybe he wandered into the if he wandered in to see the tattoo thing. To Tattooed Irishman, and he threw up the full Bosco, give him the, how are you getting on, man? I'm actually Irish myself. And O'Reilly was like, don't fucking trust them, man. Don't trust them as far as you can throw them. I've been fucked over with. I know people tell you when they get into the freak show tattooed man game, it's all cushy, but let me set the record straight. So Samuel, he tattooed up his brother. And yeah, we'll stick up a photo of that on the Instagram. It's pretty cool looking, like he's done a full torso sleeve job. By 1888, Samuel O'Reilly was going by the self-appointed title of Professor O'Reilly, which is always a great move. And he'd opened his first proper shop in the Chatham Square Dime Museum at 5 Chatham Square, where he quickly became famous for his skills, being referred to as the champion tattooer of Chatham Square. But
not the Irish champion tattoo of Chatham.
No, he got so famous that he transcended his ethnicity, that's something in those days.
I don't believe that. Yeah. In those days, even today, that's the...
Yeah, see, I couldn't figure out how Irish he was. His parents were Irish, but I think they were probably fresh immigrants. I mean, at this stage, like, yeah, there's a wave of Irish after coming over from the famine. So I assume he's like fresh off the boat, or his parents are fresh off the boat. He's first generation, but he's becoming... Yeah, so I don't know where he picked up any of this stuff. I guess he's just self-taught tattooer. But yeah, so he becomes a famous tattoo artist, but his major contribution to the world of tattooing came a few years later in 1891 when he got the first worldwide patent for an electric tattoo gun. So before this, it was all done hand poke style, prison tattoo style, which would obviously take ages and required like a different set of skills, I suppose. But what he'd done is modify rotary stencil pen that Thomas Edison had invented like in 1876, so about 20 years before this. And and he just altered that a bit to make an electric tattoo gun. The first in the world. So his name became sort of synonymous with electric tattooing then, even though in reality he only sold about 4 or 5 of the machines because they weren't that practical. But he did become associated with electric tattooing, and he kept improving the invention as it went on and just used it to do different bits. I think there's a couple of people around the same, like a lot of these inventions, a lot of people around the same time kind of came up with the same idea. Apparently, even when Edison's invention came out, like in 1876, someone wrote an anonymous letter to some paper being like, that can be used to invent, that'll be used to invent the tattoo gun someday, and it'll be called the teletattooograph, which it wasn't, but so anyway, he became synonymous with electric tattooing. Before he'd even entered his patent, he was tattooing people for the dime shows with his electric method. In 1890, George Carlovan, aka George Kelly, took to the stage in one of these dime shows, exhibiting fully. He was like completely covered in tattoos, all of them done in this electric style, and he had the words "Tattooed by O'Reilly" emblazed on his back, which I assume he knew about, but it could also be the case that he didn't know.
Great marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're really just canvases for this art style, and they're willing to just like.
Although getting words tattooed on you can be tough though, because I remember when I have one on my ribs, and we're doing a tattoo episode. I should give a shout out Outer Realm at Rossi de Medici. He's great, and people in Carlo or outside of Carlo, you should travel to Carlo. Make it a destination trip. Make it go down for the day and head off again. Don't be spending time.
Don't slow down.
Yeah, but I was going to say that getting words is tough, because if you don't look down, like you're saying, that he doesn't know if he got that tattooed by Riley on his back. Yeah. I remember having Rossi said the last word to me. He was like, and there we are with the last word of the whole thing is done now. And I'm like, fantastic, we're done. And it hurt a lot. Jesus, it hurt a lot. But Christ, we're finished. And he's like, now, on to the second word. I was like, oh, you just started there. Oh, shit, you went backwards. You went fucking backwards. I was like...
Oh, fuck.
Yeah, I was like, you could have warned me beforehand. He had just started on the last word. I was like... Oh, right. So we're going...
It's going to be a while.
Yeah, it's not great now.
Well, I suppose it's still better than getting it done over 8 days by 6 women in a dimly lit cave.
After having your balls smashed in.
Yeah, it could be worse.
Yeah, but Rossi wouldn't do that to you. He's caressing in nature, was what I would say. Less mallet.
Well, so once the electric machine is on the scene, tattooing really takes off across America. It's now more accessible to people. These machines are cheap and easy to make, which has the effect of bringing the culture of tattoos. It brings the image down because now anyone can get it. Before that, they were sort of status symbol for well-traveled people. A lot of tattoo culture, I suppose, is rooted in sailor culture, but a lot of royalty had it. In 1862, Albert, who was the Prince of Wales at the time, had a Jerusalem cross tattooed on his arm after a visit to the Holy Land. His sons then visited Japan in 1882, and they both had dragons tattooed on their arms, which all this seems very cliche now, but I suppose when he was the first person to do it, was this is amazing. I went to Japan, I got a dragon. How cool is that?
No, even then I think that's pretty on the nose.
Yeah, it's pretty
people
weird.
Come back and are like, oh really? Why didn't? Oh, and on your arse did you get a rising sun? What do you do?
But and then in the Russian family, in the Russian royal family, Peter the Great, Catherine the Great, and Nicholas II all had tattoos. Winston Churchill's mother, Lady Randolph Churchill, had a snake tattooed on her wrist.
As a representation
and a snake
of her
for
son.
a son. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So it was fashionable for aristocrats to have them because they were exclusive and needed to go to someone. It was sort of a proof that you travelled to somewhere, I guess. But then with the invention of this electric gun, it really just took off around the place, and all of a sudden anyone could get the rising sun tattooed in their arse.
But also, nothing you're saying is changing. Like, is it very cheap now to get? You wouldn't believe back in the day how expensive it was to get tattoos. You're like, Kevin,
Yeah, sure,
it is
yeah.
like legitimately a week's worth of work for a lot of people in Ireland.
Yeah, but I suppose they were talking about, like, I don't know what they would have cost back then, but basically you couldn't afford them unless you were very rich or wealthy, or a sailor for some reason. But that's pretty much it. I was reading something then that 35% of Irish people have tattoos, which sounds about right. It's probably, I'd say that increases definitely as you get younger.
Oh yeah, if you were to go down past like people under 40.
Yeah, I'd say that goes way up.
Yeah.
Because something I'd noticed from living here for the last whatever, like after the recession things, I suppose I wasn't going to that many bars or restaurants before the recession. I wasn't living in Dublin, but I feel like during the recession, like all the hip bars and restaurants were really like cobbled together. I don't know, everything just became sort of like, let's turn this electrical spool wheel over on its side and that'll be a table, and we've just got mismatched knives and forks from different places because buying a cutlery set is capitalist and bougie. And I think with that, then it sort of became more the norm for people. Like if you go into a trendy bar or restaurant in Dublin now, people are going to have face tattoos, neck tattoos. It's almost like a requirement. Whereas I feel like 10 years ago, it would be would lock you out of an awful lot of jobs.
But even to add to that, I would say that it's even more common now in media and regular jobs to find people who have like, obviously not currently in Ireland, like, you know, face tattoos or like giant neck tattoos, but you can have visible tattoos on your arms. You could probably have one on your neck, but nothing, you know, crazy. Like also, you could have if you talk to someone as like a normal human being and have a neck tattoo, no one's going to have a problem with it. The problem that people have with neck and face tattoos is that you get talking to them and they're like, I was a weekend soldier and I read one article about Syria and also we should shoot every single immigrant that comes into Ireland. You're like, right, yeah, I gotcha. Did you join the army? No, I didn't even join. I got rejected. Oh God. Like that, they're the people that give it a bad name, and also 90% of them, that's how they feel. Like it's go to some guy with half of his head shaved in Dublin who's wearing a denim jacket with a fur inside and is talking to you about 1975. Probably not going to have that opinion. You go down to Carlow to Tully's for a weekend, and there's some fella who knocks into you at the bar and goes, "Oh, sorry, man, but also have I told you my political beliefs?" You're like, oh, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. The only other note I had is that it's similar to "The Star Is My Destination" by Alfred Bester. I don't know if you ever read that book or heard of it. It's just a guy who gets shipwrecked in space and gets his face visibly tattooed, and he's not too happy about it. But it's a good read. But so there you go. There's a man, an Irish man became the first tattooed P.T. Barnum freak show circus guy, followed by another Irish man who invented the electric tattoo gun.
Okay, that's a great story. No, that's mad. Because usually we don't have people. We usually have lads go. It's the same places. Like it's rarely do we have a story about a man who ends up on an island.
That's true,
covered in tattoos.
Yeah, that is rare. That is true. But yeah, there you go. That's the story of John F. O'Connell. I don't know what the F stood for. He might have made that up and put it in himself.
It sounds like it. It sounds like yeah.
Cool. Well, sure. Yeah, we'll see you. We'll see you next week. We'll talk to you for another episode next week.
Yeah, Shafter. Good luck.
See ya.